Good evening, dear listeners. Welcome to a tranquil journey through time, where we will gently explore the understated yet fascinating world of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries. As you settle in for this soothing experience, I invite you to find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and allow the cares of the day to float away like autumn leaves carried by a soft breeze. Tonight, we will delve into the serene life of the monks who dedicated their labor to crafting these humble yet essential items, illuminating not only their own lives but also those of the communities around them. The rhythmic cadence of their work, the flickering glow of candles, and the quietude of their surroundings will all come together to create a gentle tapestry of sound and imagery, perfect for relaxation and sleep. Throughout our exploration, we will touch upon the origins of candle wick manufacturing, examining how this art form evolved within the sacred walls of the monastery. We will uncover the materials used in this ancient practice, from the humble cotton fibers cultivated in the fields to the beeswax and tallow that would give life to the flame. You will hear about the meticulous process of preparing wicks, the careful measurements taken, and the patience required to ensure each candle would burn steadily and brightly. As we meander through this historical narrative, we will also reflect on the role of light in medieval society. Candles were not merely sources of illumination, they were symbols of hope, spirituality, and community. They marked the passage of time during long winter nights and were integral to the monastic rituals that shaped the daily lives of the monks. We will also pause to consider the tranquil environment in which this work took place, the cool stone walls of the monastery, the scent of beeswax mingling with the fresh air, and the soft sounds of nature surrounding the sacred grounds. Imagine the monks, seated in quiet contemplation, their hands expertly weaving the wick while their minds drifted into prayer or reflection. It is a scene painted in calm colors, inviting you to immerse yourself in this peaceful world. As we guide you through the stages of wick production, from the initial gathering of materials to the final creation of a candle ready to bring warmth and light, allow the gentle rhythm of the words to lull you into a state of relaxation. Each detail shared will be a stepping stone on your path to serenity, leading you deeper into sleep. Finally, we will share stories of the monasteries themselves, the communities they served, and the enduring legacy of their craft. Each flickering candle lit in reverence has a story to tell, a history woven into the fabric of time. As we reflect on these tales, let the soothing cadence of my voice wash over you, carrying you gently into the realms of dreams. So, dear listeners, as we prepare to embark on this calming journey, I encourage you to breathe deeply, letting the gentle rise and fall of your breath guide you towards a place of tranquility. Allow the soft glow of candlelight to fill your mind, and let your worries dissolve like wax melting in the warmth of a flame. Now, let us transition into the peaceful echoes of the past, where the humble art of candle wick manufacturing awaits. May this exploration bring you a sense of calm and restful sleep. Together, let us begin our journey into the dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing. The origins of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries can be traced back to the 6th century, specifically to the establishment of the Benedictine order, which was formally recognized in 529 AD by Saint Benedict of Nursia at the monastery of Monte Cassino in Italy. This order emphasized the importance of manual labor, which included various forms of craft production, including the manufacturing of candles. The practice of candle making, especially regarding wick production, became integral to the daily operations of monastic life. The earliest written records concerning candle wick manufacturing are found in the Regula Benedicti, a document outlining the monastic life and practices, drafted by Saint Benedict. The text provided guidance on the use of candles for illumination during divine services, and by extension, underscored the need for reliable sources of light in the otherwise dimly lit spaces of the monastery. The use of candles was not merely practical, it also held symbolic significance relating to the light of Christ. By the 8th century, candle wick production had become a localized craft within various monastic communities throughout Europe. Notable establishments include the Abbey of Fulda, founded in 744 AD by Saint Sturm, a disciple of Saint Boniface. The Fulda Abbey records, preserved in the monastery's archives, document the rudimentary procedures involved in the creation of wicks. The monks used materials such as flax and cotton, which were spun into threads before being dipped in melted tallow or beeswax. In the 10th century, the Abbey of Cluny, founded in 910 AD in Burgundy, France, became an influential center for various crafts, including candle wick production. Cluny's abbots, particularly Hugh of Cluny, died in 1109, implemented administrative procedures to oversee the operations of the monastery's workshops. The monks were organized into guilds, with specific members tasked with different aspects of production. The architectural layout of the Abbey of Cluny included designated areas for workshops, which were often situated adjacent to the kitchens where tallow was rendered. The daily routine within these monastic candle wick manufacturing operations adhered closely to the rule of Saint Benedict, which stipulated a balance between prayer, work, and study. Monks would typically rise at dawn for the first hour of prayer, known as matins. Following this, they would engage in manual labor, including candle wick production, from approximately 7 a.m. until the midday meal. The production process was methodical. The wicks would be prepared by twisting strands of flax fibers, which were then soaked in a mixture of tallow and beeswax. The geographical spread of monastic candle wick manufacturing can be observed in the documented practices of the Cistercian order, which emerged in the 12th century. The Cistercian Abbey of Clairvaux, founded in 1115 by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, adopted a more systematic approach to wick production. The architectural design of Cistercian monasteries included large, well-ventilated workshops that allowed for efficient candle wick production. Monks utilized simple tools made from wood and metal to create uniform wicks, which were integral to the broader candle-making process. The administrative procedures in Cistercian monasteries involved meticulous record-keeping. The abbots would maintain ledgers detailing the quantity of materials used, the number of wicks produced, and the allocation of resources for candle production. Such records were often inscribed on parchment and stored within the abbey's scriptorium. The emphasis on documentation reflects the broader trends in medieval Europe towards increased organization and efficiency in monastic operations. As the 13th century progressed, the production of candle wicks became increasingly specialized. By this time, the production of wicks was often delegated to specific monks known as wickers, who had developed expertise in this craft. The architectural layout of monasteries such as the Abbey of Citeaux, founded in 1098, included rooms specifically designated for the preparation and storage of wicks. These areas were typically dark and cool, which facilitated the proper curing of the wicks before they were used in candle making. Daily routines surrounding wick production were strictly regulated according to the liturgical calendar. During certain seasons, such as Advent and Lent, the demand for candles increased significantly due to liturgical requirements. Consequently, the monks would adjust their schedules to accommodate the increased production needs. On days of high liturgical significance, the monks would often begin their work earlier in the day, around 5 a.m., to ensure that sufficient wicks were prepared for the evening services. In the 14th century, the Black Death, 1347 to 1351, had profound implications for monastic communities and their production practices. The reduction in the monastic population led to a decline in candle wick manufacturing activities in some regions. However, monasteries such as the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland adapted by streamlining their operations. The administrative procedures were modified to account for the reduced workforce, with remaining monks tasked with multiple roles, including wick production as well as other essential duties. The architectural changes during this period also reflected adaptations to the circumstances of the time. In the Abbey of St. Gall, which was founded in the 8th century, the layout was reorganized to create multifunctional spaces where candle wick manufacturing could be performed alongside other crafts. The monks utilized the existing structures more efficiently, often conducting wick preparation in the same areas where they engaged in weaving and brewing. The late medieval period saw a resurgence in the demand for candles, driven by the growing popularity of personal devotion and the establishment of parish churches that required significant quantities of candles for services. Monasteries continued to serve as vital centers for candle wick manufacturing. The monks of the Abbey of Saint Denis, founded in the 7th century near Paris, became particularly adept at producing high-quality wicks suitable for the burgeoning market. The administrative procedures for wick production in Saint Denis included the establishment of a small committee composed of senior monks who were responsible for overseeing the quality control of the wicks produced. This committee would conduct regular inspections and maintain detailed records of production outputs. Daily routines remained structured around the liturgical calendar, with production schedules adjusted to accommodate the demand for candles during major religious festivals. As the 15th century approached, the advent of new materials and technologies began to influence candle wick production. The introduction of cotton as a wick material, which was more efficient and provided a longer burn time, gained popularity. Monasteries began experimenting with different formulations and blends, documenting their findings in monastic records. The Abbey of Westminster in England, established in 960 AD, became known for its innovative approaches, particularly in the production of wicks that could support the burgeoning candle-making industry. The architectural configurations of monasteries were also evolving during this period, allowing for greater integration of craft production within the monastic life. In Westminster, the construction of new workshops adjacent to the main abbey facilitated the increased production of wicks, which were essential for the numerous candles used in the abbey's elaborate liturgical ceremonies. The monks maintained a strict division of labor, with specific individuals responsible for wick preparation, while others focused on the dipping and finishing processes. The administrative procedures for candle wick manufacturing continued to evolve, with a growing emphasis on standardization. Records from Westminster indicate that the monks established specific measurements for wick lengths and diameters, which were documented in their production ledgers. The daily routines remained anchored in the monastic schedule, with the monks rising early to engage in both prayer and labor. The intertwining of spiritual and practical activities was a defining characteristic of monastic life throughout this period. By the time the Reformation began in the early 16th century, the role of candle wick manufacturing within monasteries faced significant challenges. The dissolution of monastic communities, particularly in England under King Henry VIII, led to the decline of many traditional practices, including candle wick production. The records and practices that had been meticulously maintained over centuries began to dissipate as monasteries were repurposed or dismantled. In conclusion, the history of candle wick manufacturing within medieval monasteries is a testament to the interplay of craft, spirituality, and communal life. The administrative procedures, architectural configurations, and daily routines of monastic communities contributed significantly to the development of this craft from its origins in the 6th century through to the onset of the Reformation in the 16th century. While the details may appear mundane, the legacy of these practices continues to inform our understanding of medieval monastic life and its contributions to the broader socio-economic landscape of the time. The construction methods and materials utilized in the candle wick manufacturing process at medieval monasteries were dictated by both the availability of resources and the technological knowledge of the period. The primary material for wicks was derived from natural fibers, commonly flax or cotton, which were woven or twisted into strands of varying thicknesses. The average dimensions of a standard wick were approximately 5 to 7 millimeters in diameter and 30 to 50 centimeters in length, which allowed for optimal burning and illumination when dipped in tallow or beeswax. The construction of the wick manufacturing area within the monastery typically adhered to the architectural standards of the time. The workshops were often situated in the east wing of the cloister, where natural light could illuminate workspaces during daylight hours. Walls were generally constructed from local stone or timber, with thatched roofs to provide insulation against the elements. The floors were commonly made of packed earth or stone slabs, facilitating easy cleaning of the inevitable wax drippings and debris. Maintenance procedures for candle wick production were systematic and often scheduled according to the liturgical calendar. Weekly inspections of the weaving equipment were conducted to ensure that no fibers were left frayed or damaged, which could compromise the quality of the wicks. The monks responsible for this task would employ a simple tool known as the spindle, which was used to twist the fibers into the desired shape. Regular cleaning was essential, particularly to prevent the accumulation of wax and dust, which could lead to fire hazards. The workshop was swept daily, and tools were washed with warm water mixed with vinegar to prevent the buildup of residue. Financial records pertaining to candle wick manufacturing were meticulously kept by the monastery's appointed treasurer. These records included detailed accounts of material purchases, labor costs, and sales of completed candles. For instance, In the year 1235, the Abbey of St. Pierre recorded an expenditure of 10 denarii for 200 meters of flax fiber, sufficient for producing approximately 500 wicks. Additionally, the cost of tallow, which was a primary fuel source for the candles, was recorded at 15 denarii for a barrel weighing 100 pounds, sufficient to produce around 300 candles. Income from candle sales varied considerably based on the time of year and local demand. During the Advent season, the Abbey of St. Pierre noted a significant increase in sales, with over 200 candles sold in December alone, generating a revenue of 50 denarii. Conversely, the summer months saw a decline in sales, reflecting the reduced need for indoor lighting. The financial records also indicated that excess candles were often gifted to local churches or used during feasts, thereby reinforcing the monastery's role within the community and its economic interdependencies. Personnel involved in the candle wick manufacturing process were primarily monks who had taken on these duties as part of their commitment to communal labor. Each monk typically had a specific job description, which included the roles of weaver, dipper, and overseer. The weaver was responsible for preparing the wicks, while the dipper was tasked with immersing the prepared wicks into heated tallow or beeswax to create the finished candles. The overseer, often a senior monk, ensured that production quotas were met and maintained the quality of the output. In terms of technical specifications, the candles produced by these monks varied in size and composition based on their intended use. Standard candles were approximately 2 centimeters in diameter and ranged from 20 to 30 centimeters in height. Those intended for liturgical purposes, such as altar candles, were often larger, measuring up to 5 centimeters in diameter and 50 centimeters in height, designed to burn for extended periods, often over several hours. The process of candle making began with the preparation of the wick, which entailed soaking the fiber in a mixture of water and diluted tallow to enhance its burnability. Once prepared, the wicks were hung to dry for a period of 24 hours. Following this, the dipping process commenced, wherein the wicks were repeatedly immersed in molten tallow or beeswax. Each dip typically involved a temperature ranging from 70 to 90 degrees Celsius, allowing for sufficient adhesion of the wax to the wick. The monks recorded the number of dips required to achieve the desired thickness. For instance, a standard candle would typically require 15 dips, while larger altar candles could necessitate upwards of 25 dips. Each dip would be followed by a cooling period, during which the wax solidified around the wick, creating a sturdy and burnable product. The final product was assessed for quality based on several criteria: the evenness of the wax coating, the straightness of the wick, and the absence of air bubbles, which could lead to uneven burning. In cases where candles did not meet the standards, they were often repurposed. For example, they could be melted down and redipped, a practice that ensured minimal waste within the monastic economy. The tallow used in candle making was primarily sourced from local livestock, particularly sheep, which provided a renewable resource for the production process. The rendering of tallow was often performed during the colder months, specifically in late autumn when livestock were culled for winter provisions. The rendering process involved boiling animal fat until it liquefied, after which impurities were skimmed off, leaving behind a clean product suitable for candle making. In summation, the candle wick manufacturing process within medieval monasteries was characterized by its reliance on local materials, meticulous construction methods, and structured maintenance and financial practices. The personnel involved played specific roles, each contributing to the efficiency and quality of the final product. The technical specifications of the candles produced were closely monitored to ensure adherence to both practicality and liturgical requirements. These elements together paint a portrait of a methodical and community-oriented approach to candle manufacturing that resonated throughout the medieval period, underpinning the essential role that light played in monastic life and the broader socio-economic landscape of the time. The construction methods and materials utilized in the candle wick manufacturing process at medieval monasteries were dictated by both the availability of resources and the technological knowledge of the period. The primary material for wicks was derived from natural fibers, commonly flax or cotton, which were woven or twisted into strands of varying thicknesses. The average dimensions of a standard wick were approximately 5 to 7 millimeters in diameter and 30 to 50 centimeters in length, which allowed for effective burning and optimal lighting conditions. During the early medieval period, around the 5th to 10th centuries, monasteries were among the few institutions engaged in candle making, primarily to ensure the proper lighting of their scriptoriums and places of worship. Monks often cultivated flax in their gardens, as it was a versatile plant that could be processed into linen as well as candle wicks. Historical records indicate that by the 12th century, particularly in regions such as Flanders and England, the demand for candles increased significantly due to their use in both religious and secular contexts, including in homes and towns. The method of wick construction involved several steps, beginning with the harvesting of flax. Once harvested, the flax stalks were soaked in water to facilitate the separation of fibers. This process, known as retting, usually occurred between May and August, as warmer temperatures were more conducive for effective fiber extraction. The resulting fibers were then dried, combed, and spun into threads. The spinning process often relied on a spindle, a simple tool that allowed for the twisting of fibers into a continuous strand. For example, in the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland, records show that monks employed spinning wheels as early as the 11th century, which significantly improved the efficiency of wick production. This technological advancement allowed for the creation of more uniform and durable wicks, which were essential for consistent candle performance. Once the threads were prepared, the next step was the twisting of these fibers into wicks. Monks would often employ a simple technique known as twisting, where two or more strands were tightly wound together to create a thicker wick. This method not only contributed to the wick's durability but also optimized its burning properties. The average wick could hold a specific amount of tallow or beeswax, with studies indicating that wicks of this size could absorb approximately 2 to 3 grams of wax per centimeter of wick length. After the wicks were constructed, they required treatment with various substances to enhance their burning capabilities. Monks often dipped the wicks in melted tallow or beeswax, which served to protect the fibers and improve the wick's ability to draw fuel. The dipping process was typically repeated multiple times to build up a sufficient layer of wax, ensuring a steady and even burn when lit. Historical texts suggest that the monks of the Benedictine Abbey of Cluny in France, founded in 910, produced candles that were renowned for their quality, thanks in part to their meticulous wick preparation methods. Throughout the medieval period, the significance of candle wicks extended beyond their practical applications. They also held symbolic meanings within religious contexts. Candles were often lit during services to represent the light of Christ, and thus the quality of the wick was directly linked to the spiritual experience of the congregation. By the 13th century, with the rise of the Gothic architectural style, larger and more elaborate churches required enhanced lighting solutions, further driving the demand for high-quality candles. In terms of measurements, the thickness and length of the wicks could be adjusted based on the type of candle being produced. For instance, larger altar candles might utilize wicks that were 10 to 12 millimeters in diameter, while smaller household candles often used the standard dimensions of 5 to 7 millimeters. Additionally, the length of the wick would vary depending on the size of the candle, with longer candles requiring proportional increases in wick length to maintain proper combustion. The candle-making industry eventually saw the introduction of more complex techniques, particularly during the late medieval period and into the Renaissance. By the 15th century, evidence suggests that some monasteries began experimenting with different wick materials, including those made from animal hair and other natural fibers like jute, to enhance the performance of their candles. These innovations reflected a growing understanding of combustion and materials science, allowing for more efficient and longer-lasting candles. In conclusion, the candle wick manufacturing process at medieval monasteries was a complex interplay of resource availability, technological advancement, and spiritual significance. The methods developed during this period laid the groundwork for future innovations in candle production and significantly influenced both religious practices and domestic life in medieval Europe. The construction methods and materials utilized in the candle wick manufacturing process during the medieval period were pivotal in determining the quality and efficiency of the candles produced. The primary material for wicks was derived from flax, a crop that had been cultivated extensively since antiquity. In the 12th century, specifically from 1100 to 1200 CE, it was common for monasteries to maintain small plots of land dedicated to growing flax, which would ultimately be processed into linen thread for wicks. The average yield of flax per acre was approximately 1,000 pounds, which could produce about 500 pounds of usable linen, suggesting a careful balance between agricultural output and the needs of candle production. The process of wick construction typically involved the twisting of multiple strands of flax linen into a single cord. This twisting was performed using a simple spindle, which had been in use since at least the 10th century. A standard wick length varied based on the size of the candle being produced, but a typical length ranged from 10 to 15 inches. The diameter of the wick was usually around 0.25 inches, designed to ensure a steady burn when placed within the molded wax. The monks, who were responsible for this aspect of candle production, were trained in these methods, often starting their apprenticeship at a young age, around 12 years, and progressing through increasingly complex tasks. In terms of maintenance procedures, the care of both the candle-making tools and the production space was paramount. The workspace, typically located within the monastery's larger workshop area, required regular cleaning to prevent wax buildup and contamination by dust and pests. The floors were often made of compacted earth or stone, which facilitated cleaning with simple tools like brooms made from straw or bundles of twigs. Maintenance of the molds, typically made from wood or metal, was crucial to ensure that they remained free of wax residue. The monks would regularly soak the molds in hot water and scrub them with a coarse cloth to remove any residual wax. This cleaning process was usually conducted at the end of each production cycle, generally once a week. Financial records and costs associated with candle production were meticulously documented within the monastery's ledgers. From the late 12th century onwards, the usage of parchment for record-keeping became more standardized, and it is noted that from 1180 to 1200 CE, a typical entry would include the cost of raw materials such as wax, which was often procured from local beekeepers. During this period, the average cost of beeswax was about 10 pence per pound, which was a significant expense given that a single candle required approximately 0.5 to 1 pound of wax depending on its size. Additionally, the monks would account for the labor costs associated with wick production and candle molding, which were often calculated on a per-candle basis. Candle sales were recorded in terms of units sold, with the average price per candle ranging from 2 to 4 pence, depending on the candle's size and quality. Seasonal fluctuations often affected sales, with increased demand noted during significant religious events such as Christmas and Easter. The monks kept detailed records of candle sales, which were often cross-referenced with the monastery's overall income to assess profitability. In 1195 CE, one particular ledger entry noted a total sale of 300 candles for the month of December, generating a revenue of 12 shillings, a substantial amount that contributed to the monastery's general fund. The personnel involved in the candle wick manufacturing process were typically organized into a hierarchy within the monastery. At the top of this hierarchy was the master candle maker, a role that required both skill and experience. This individual was responsible for overseeing the entire production process and ensuring the quality of the finished product. Below the master candle maker were several journeymen, who had completed their apprenticeships and were tasked with specific responsibilities such as wick twisting and mold preparation. These journeymen were usually in their late teens or early 20s and had a clear understanding of the candle-making process. Apprentices, often young boys who entered the monastery at around the age of 12, would assist the journeyman and learn the craft through direct observation and hands-on experience. Their duties typically included gathering materials, cleaning the workspace, and performing menial tasks that allowed them to gradually acquire the skills necessary for candle production. The apprenticeship period could last anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on the individual's aptitude and the complexity of the tasks they were expected to master. The technical specifications of the candles produced during this time reflect both the craftsmanship and the utilitarian nature of the products. A standard candle would measure approximately 6 to 8 inches in height and 1 to 2 inches in diameter. The weight of a typical candle ranged from 0.5 to 1 pound, depending on the intended use. For example, altar candles, which were often larger and thicker, could weigh up to 2 pounds and were designed to burn for extended periods, typically around 12 to 18 hours. The burning time was influenced by the wick size, the quality of the wax, and the environmental conditions in which the candle was burned. Candles were primarily made from beeswax, which was highly valued for its clean burning properties and pleasant aroma. However, the use of tallow, a rendered form of animal fat, was also common, particularly for candles meant for everyday use in the monastery. Tallow candles, while less desirable due to their smoky burn and unpleasant odor, were significantly cheaper to produce. The proportion of beeswax to tallow in candle production varied, often dictated by the financial circumstances of the monastery. A common ratio for an average candle was 70% tallow to 30% beeswax, although higher quality candles for religious purposes would skew heavily towards beeswax. In conclusion, the dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing reveal a systematic approach to candle production that was characterized by a well-defined structure of construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial oversight, personnel organization, and technical specifications. The candles produced during this period served both practical and spiritual purposes, illuminating the lives of those within the monastery and contributing to the broader religious practices of medieval Europe. The meticulous attention to detail in each aspect of candle making not only ensured a consistent product but also reflected the monks' dedication to their craft and the religious significance of their work. The construction of candles at the medieval monastery was a process steeped in methodical precision and adherence to tradition. The primary construction materials comprised beeswax, tallow, and occasionally a mixture of both. Beeswax, favored for its clean burning properties and pleasant aroma, was obtained from local beekeepers, with the monastery often purchasing approximately 50 pounds per season, typically during the months of March and April when bees were most productive. The cost of beeswax in the year 1276 was approximately 2 pence per pound, though prices could fluctuate based on local availability and demand. Tallow, on the other hand, was rendered from animal fat, particularly that of sheep and cattle, which were often sourced from the monastery's own livestock. The rendering process involved boiling the fat in large cauldrons, a practice that typically took place in late autumn, specifically in November, when temperatures were cooler, allowing for better preservation of the rendered product. The monks would usually yield around 100 pounds of tallow per cycle. The financial outlay for tallow production was significantly lower, costing roughly 1 halfpenny per pound, thus making it an economically viable alternative to beeswax, though ultimately less desirable for liturgical purposes. The actual candle-making process began with the preparation of wicks. The wicks were fashioned from cotton or linen fibers, with the latter being preferred for its sturdiness and ability to draw wax. Each wick was cut to a uniform length of approximately 12 inches, a standard measurement established in the year 1234, which ensured even burning. The monks would dip the wicks into melted wax or tallow repeatedly, allowing each layer to harden before applying the next. This dipping process could take several hours, with a full batch of wicks requiring approximately 6 hours to complete. Maintenance procedures for the candle-making equipment were also rigorously defined. The cauldrons used for melting wax or tallow necessitated regular cleaning to prevent residue buildup, which could affect the quality of the candles produced. Maintenance schedules were established bi-weekly, typically on Thursdays, when the monks would gather to inspect and clean the equipment. Tools such as ladles and molds were also meticulously cared for. Molds, often made from clay or metal, were examined for cracks or imperfections every month. In the event of damage, repairs would be conducted using a mixture of beeswax and resin, forming a seal that would allow for continued use of the molds. Financial records related to candle production were scrupulously kept in ledgers, dating back to the year 1250, which provided a comprehensive overview of expenses and revenue. Each entry was meticulously inscribed in Latin, with columns dedicated to material costs, labor hours, and sales income. For example, in the fiscal year of 1280, the total expenditure for wax and tallow amounted to 28 shillings, while the income from candle sales reached 40 shillings, resulting in a modest profit margin of 12 shillings. This careful accounting allowed the monastery to allocate funds for other endeavors, such as the upkeep of the gardens and the repair of the cloister. Personnel involved in the candle-making process were primarily comprised of novice monks, who were tasked with learning the craft under the supervision of a designated master candle maker. This position, typically held by a monk with at least 5 years of experience, was critical to maintaining the quality of the candles produced. Job descriptions were clearly delineated, with novices responsible for wick preparation, wax melting, and cleaning, while the master candle maker oversaw the entire process, ensuring compliance with established techniques and standards. In the year 1305, the master candle maker, Brother Alcuin, was noted for implementing a system of apprenticeship among the novices, which consisted of a 6-month training period followed by a month of independent work. This structured approach not only enhanced the skills of the monks but also fostered a sense of accountability and pride in their work. The novices were required to document their progress in individual journals, noting daily tasks completed and any challenges encountered. Technical specifications regarding the candles produced were likewise standardized. The most common candle size was approximately 1 inch in diameter and 12 inches in length, with weights varying between 4 to 6 ounces depending on the density of the wax used. The burn time of a standard candle was approximately 8 hours when using pure beeswax, while tallow candles burned for a shorter duration of around 6 hours. This variance was crucial for liturgical planning, as specific types of candles were designated for particular religious occasions. For instance, the Feast of the Nativity, celebrated on December 25th, required a higher production of beeswax candles, as they were used during midnight mass and other significant ceremonies. In the year 1292, the monastery produced 200 beeswax candles specifically for this event, a task that began in early December and culminated just days before the celebration. The meticulous planning was essential for ensuring that the candles were ready in time, as delays could disrupt the solemnity of the occasion. The monastery also produced specialized candles, such as taper candles for use in the choir and altar, which were typically longer and thinner, measuring around 1.5 inches in diameter and 18 inches in length. These were often adorned with intricate designs, achieved by dipping the candles in colored wax, a practice that began in the late 13th century. The introduction of colored candles, however, necessitated additional investment in dyes and materials, which were recorded in the financial ledgers. In the year 1300, for example, the cost of dyeing materials was approximately 3 shillings, which added to the overall production cost. The careful documentation of all aspects of candle production, from construction methods to financial records, reflected the monks' commitment to order and discipline. Each candle produced was not merely a source of light, it represented the culmination of labor, skill, and a deep-rooted spiritual significance that permeated every facet of monastic life. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing, while seemingly mundane, provide a profound insight into the daily lives of the monks and their unwavering dedication to their craft. The intertwining of craftsmanship, faith, and community is evident in every entry, each candle serving as a testament to the enduring legacy of a simpler, yet profoundly significant era. The construction of candles at the medieval monastery was a process steeped in methodical precision and adherence to tradition, reflecting both the spiritual and practical aspects of monastic life. The primary construction materials comprised beeswax, tallow, and occasionally a mixture of both. Beeswax, favored for its clean burning properties and pleasant aroma, was obtained from local beekeepers. The monastery often purchased approximately 50 pounds per season, typically during the months of March and April when bees were most productive. The cost of beeswax during the late 12th century could range from 2 to 3 pence per pound, a significant investment for a small community but deemed essential for their rituals and daily life. The candle-making process began in early March when the monks would prepare by gathering their tools, wooden molds, wicks made from flax or cotton, and large cauldrons for melting the wax. The monks would set aside approximately 2 weeks for the candle-making endeavor, which was typically done in the warmth of the monastery's kitchen to facilitate the melting of the wax. The historical context here is crucial, as the production of candles was not merely a craft but a vital component of the monastic economy. Many monasteries were self-sufficient and relied on candle production not only for their internal use but also as a source of income through trade with nearby towns. The first step in the candle-making process involved preparing the wicks, which were often dipped in molten wax multiple times to ensure durability and a steady burn. This dipping process could take up to a week, as the monks would carefully layer the wax until the wicks reached a desirable thickness of about a quarter inch. Once the wicks were adequately prepared, the monks would begin melting the beeswax in large cauldrons over a low flame, ensuring the temperature did not exceed 160 degrees Fahrenheit to preserve the wax's quality. As the wax melted, the monks would add tallow, when available, to create a more cost-effective candle. Tallow, rendered from animal fat, was less expensive than beeswax, and its use allowed the monastery to produce larger quantities of candles. However, the ratio of beeswax to tallow was critical. A common mixture was about 70% beeswax to 30% tallow, which helped maintain a pleasant aroma while also reducing costs. Once the wax reached a viscous consistency, the monks would pour it into wooden molds, often carved with religious symbols or scripts, which added a spiritual significance to the candles. These molds typically held 5 to 10 candles at a time and required careful handling to prevent spills. The cooling process for the candles could take several hours, and monks would often engage in prayer or chanting during this time, reinforcing the spiritual connection to their work. After the candles had set, they were removed from the molds and trimmed to a uniform height of approximately 12 inches, ideal for burning in the monastery's chapel, which could accommodate dozens of candles during a single service. The use of candles during liturgical celebrations, such as Easter and Christmas, was particularly significant, with larger candles known as paschal candles being crafted specifically for these occasions. These candles were often adorned with intricate designs and symbols to represent Christ and the resurrection. In addition to their religious uses, the candles produced by the monastery were also sold to local townspeople and traders, further embedding the monastery within the economic fabric of the region. A particularly noteworthy case study involves the Abbey of St. Albans in England, which in the 13th century became well known for its high-quality beeswax candles. The abbey's production, which reached upwards of 200 pounds of beeswax candles annually, not only supplied local churches but also attracted buyers from as far away as London. The candle-making process at the medieval monastery, therefore, was much more than a simple craft. It was an embodiment of monastic life, blending spirituality with practicality and economic necessity. As the monks engaged in this sacred task, they were not just producing light for their physical surroundings but also illuminating the path of faith for themselves and their community. The construction methods employed in the manufacturing of candle wicks during the medieval period were characterized by their simplicity and functionality. The primary materials utilized for wick production included flax, cotton, and, less frequently, hemp. The selection of these materials was based upon their availability in the local vicinity of the monastery and their burn characteristics. For instance, flax fibers, which were harvested annually during the late summer months, provided a desirable balance between burn rate and structural integrity. The process of preparing flax for wick production began with retting, a method of decomposing the outer layers of the plant to separate the fibers from the stalk. This was typically conducted in nearby streams or ponds, where the submerged fibers would undergo a fermentation process lasting approximately 10 to 14 days. Once sufficiently wet, the fibers were dried in the sun, then broken and scutched to remove any residual woody material. The cleaned fibers were subsequently spun into threads with a spindle, resulting in lengths suitable for wick creation. The dimensions of the finished wicks varied, although a standard wick measured approximately 0.5 centimeters in diameter and could be produced in lengths ranging from 10 to 30 centimeters, depending on the intended use. For example, shorter wicks were typically employed for smaller lanterns, while longer wicks were favored for larger candelabras used in the monastery's chapel. In terms of maintenance procedures, the monks adhered to a strict schedule to ensure the quality and functionality of both the candle wicks and the candles themselves. This maintenance included regular inspections of the drying area, which was typically a well-ventilated attic space within the monastery. The drying process was critical, as excess moisture could lead to mold and degradation of the fibers. Inspections occurred bi-weekly, with a dedicated monk assigned the task of assessing the condition of the wicks. Should any fibers exhibit signs of dampness or decay, they were disposed of immediately to prevent contamination of the entire stock. Additionally, the monks maintained meticulous records of their candle inventory, noting both the number of wicks produced and the candles manufactured. This practice began in earnest in 1273, when Brother Alcuin, a meticulous scribe, initiated a detailed ledger that chronicled each aspect of wick production. The ledger entries included the date of production, the quantity of wicks, and the type of material used. By 1300, this record-keeping had evolved into a comprehensive system, with separate columns for flax, cotton, and hemp wicks, as well as annotations regarding the quality of each batch. Financial records from the monastery also reveal the economic aspects of candle wick manufacturing. The costs associated with raw materials were inherently variable, influenced by factors such as seasonality and regional supply. For instance, in 1295, the cost of flax fiber was recorded at 2 pence per pound, while cotton, being a rarer commodity at that time, commanded a price of 4 pence per pound. The monks often relied on trade with local farmers or merchants, exchanging surplus produce for necessary materials. A notable entry in the financial records from 1302 indicates a transaction involving the trade of 20 pounds of barley for 10 pounds of flax. The overall expenditure associated with wick production was relatively modest. In 1305, the total cost of producing 1,000 wicks was documented at 10 pence, including the cost of raw materials, maintenance of tools, and the labor of the monks involved in the process. This figure underscores the efficiency of the monastery's operations, as the candles produced offered a significant return on investment, illuminating both the cloisters and generating income through sale to local parishioners. Personnel involved in the candle wick manufacturing process were primarily monks who had dedicated themselves to the craft. Each monk held specific job descriptions that outlined their responsibilities. The senior wick maker, usually a monk with considerable experience, oversaw the entire production process, ensuring adherence to the established methods and quality standards. Under this role, there were typically 2 to 3 junior monks, collectively referred to as wick apprentices, who assisted in the preparation of fibers and the spinning of wicks. The wick apprentices were expected to undertake various tasks, including the retting of flax, the spinning of fibers, and the assembly of wicks. Each apprentice was required to complete a minimum of 3 years of training before they could be considered for promotion to the role of senior wickmaker. This apprenticeship program was formalized in the early 14th century and included both practical training and theological education, as the monks believed that the act of creating wicks was a spiritual endeavor. In terms of technical specifications, the performance characteristics of the candles produced were of paramount importance. The monks conducted numerous tests to ascertain the burn time and brightness of their candles, which were typically constructed using a mixture of beeswax and tallow. The ratio of beeswax to tallow varied, with a more substantial proportion of beeswax being utilized for high-quality candles intended for liturgical purposes. A standard candle, measuring approximately 2 centimeters in diameter and 25 centimeters in height, would burn for an estimated 5 to 6 hours, depending on environmental conditions and wick quality. The monks also explored various wick designs to improve burn efficiency. The most common design involved a simple twisted structure, although some monks experimented with multi-strand wicks, which were believed to produce a brighter flame. The multi-strand wicks, however, presented challenges in terms of consistency and ease of production, leading to their eventual decline in favor of the more reliable twisted design. Standardized testing protocols were established in 1310 to assess wick and candle performance. These protocols included measuring the rate of wax consumption, flame height, and the amount of soot produced during burning. Results from these tests were meticulously recorded in the monastery's archives, contributing to the body of knowledge surrounding candle production and further refining the monks' methods over time. The candle wick manufacturing process also aligned closely with the liturgical calendar, with production levels peaking during key religious observances. For example, prior to the Feast of the Nativity in December, the monks undertook increased production to meet the demands of both the monastery's internal needs and the local community. A notable spike in production was recorded in 1325, with over 2,000 wicks created in the month leading up to Christmas. This demand necessitated the recruitment of additional labor from other monastic communities, underscoring the interconnectedness of candle wick production across the region. In conclusion, the candle wick manufacturing process within the medieval monastery was a multifaceted endeavor that encompassed construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial management, personnel roles, and technical specifications. This seemingly mundane activity was, in reality, a vital component of monastic life, contributing to both the spiritual and economic well-being of the community. The legacy of these practices continues to inform historical understandings of medieval craftsmanship and the daily lives of monks dedicated to the pursuit of both light and faith. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing. Part 6, Regional Variations and Comparisons. The craft of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries was not a monolithic practice, rather, it was characterized by notable regional variations that reflected local resources, climatic conditions, and cultural practices. In the north of England, for example, monasteries such as those in York and Durham often utilized a variety of plant fibers, such as flax and hemp, which were abundantly cultivated in their cooler, temperate climate. These fibers were favored for their durability and ability to retain wax, yielding a consistent burn quality. Conversely, monasteries situated in the warmer southern regions, like those in Kent and Sussex, lean towards the use of rushes and reeds, materials that thrived in the marshy landscapes of the area. The process of harvesting and preparing these materials was intricately tied to the local agricultural calendar. For instance, the rushes were typically harvested in late summer, dried, and then braided into wicks, a practice that not only ensured a steady supply but also fostered community involvement as villagers often participated in the harvest. This geographic divergence in materials extended to the methods of wick construction as well. Northern monasteries, benefiting from a more robust supply of flax, often adopted techniques that involved twisting and braiding multiple strands to create thicker, sturdier wicks. In contrast, the southern practices favored simpler, flat braids which, while less resilient, were adequate for the shorter burning times of the smaller candles used in local liturgical practices. These regional differences also influenced the design of the candles themselves. In the north, where longer nights necessitated extended periods of illumination, candles were often fashioned to be taller and thicker, providing a more substantial burn time. Meanwhile, southern candles tended to be smaller, reflecting the milder evenings and the less rigorous demands of local monastic schedules. Part 7, Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of candle wick manufacturing within the confines of medieval monasteries can be traced through several pivotal phases, each marked by advancements in techniques and materials. The early medieval period, often referred to as the Dark Ages, saw the initial reliance on rudimentary materials such as tallow and beeswax, which were the primary sources for candle production. Wicks during this time were typically made from twisted fibers of whatever plant matter was locally available, resulting in a rather inefficient burning pattern. As we transition into the High Middle Ages, a significant shift occurred with the introduction of more sophisticated techniques, such as the use of multiple wicks in a single candle. This innovation, which allowed for a more uniform distribution of heat and light, was particularly noted in the candle-making treatises that began to emerge in the 12th century. The monks, ever the scholars, began documenting their findings and improvements, leading to the creation of standardized wick sizes that facilitated better control over the burning process. The late medieval period ushered in even further advancements, coinciding with the rise of trade and commerce. The introduction of external influences from the Mediterranean and the East brought new materials and methods into the fold, notably the use of cotton and the practice of dipping candles. The introduction of cotton wicking, derived from trade routes that extended into Asia, allowed for a finer, more efficient wick that burned with a steadier flame. Monasteries began to adopt these foreign techniques, integrating them into their traditional practices, thus marking a significant evolution in the candle wick manufacturing process. Part 8, Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The candle wick manufacturing practices within monastic settings did not escape the watchful eyes of local and ecclesiastical authorities. By the 13th century, various regulations began to emerge, imposing bureaucratic oversight on the production and sale of candles, primarily to ensure quality and prevent fraud. These regulations were often codified in local charters and decrees, which specified the acceptable materials for wick production, the dimensions of standard candles, and even the pricing structures. For instance, the Statute of Candles, enacted in 1344 under the reign of Edward III, mandated that all candles produced for public use must be composed of at least 50% beeswax, a measure intended to curb the rampant use of inferior tallow candles that had proliferated due to rising costs. This statute had direct implications for wick production, as the quality of the wick was intrinsically tied to the type of wax used. Monasteries were compelled to adjust their wick crafting methods to accommodate the higher melting point of beeswax, which required wicks to be both finer and more tightly woven to ensure a proper burn. In addition to these production mandates, various guilds began to form, asserting control over the candle-making trade, including wick manufacturing. These guilds not only set standards for production but also provided a regulatory framework that governed the training of apprentices and the sharing of techniques among craftsmen. Thus, the once esoteric knowledge of candle wick manufacturing became somewhat democratized, albeit still under the watchful eye of a guild master. Part 9, Supply Chain and Logistics. The logistics of candle wick manufacturing in the medieval monastic context were as intricate as they were mundane. The supply chain for materials was often local, relying heavily on the immediate agricultural outputs of the surrounding lands. Monasteries, generally self-sustaining units, grew an array of plants suitable for wick production within their cloistered gardens, but they also engaged in trade with neighboring villages, exchanging surplus wax for raw materials such as flax or rushes. Transporting these materials to and from the monasteries was a task fraught with challenges. The roads of medieval Europe were often in disrepair, and the reliance on horse-drawn carts meant that logistics were limited by both weather conditions and the physical endurance of the animals. Monasteries would often designate specific days for the procurement of materials, aligning these activities with market days in nearby towns, ensuring that they could acquire the best quality fibers and wax while minimizing the travel burden on their resources. Furthermore, the production process itself necessitated a well-structured workflow. Upon receiving the raw materials, monks would categorize and store them in designated areas of the monastery, often in cool, dry places to prevent deterioration. The preparation of fibers for wick making was a meticulous process, involving soaking, drying, and braiding, all of which required careful timing to ensure optimal quality. The final phase of logistics involved the distribution of the finished candles. Monasteries often had established networks for the sale of their products, distributing candles not only for local liturgical use but also to nearby towns and villages. This distribution was achieved through a series of designated merchants, often monks themselves, who would travel to various markets to ensure a steady flow of income for the abbey. Part 10: Record-keeping methods. In an era where the written word was still a luxury, record-keeping methods within the context of candle wick manufacturing were surprisingly sophisticated. Monasteries utilized a variety of methods to document their production processes, supply inventories, and sales transactions. Scribes, often monks with training in literacy and numeracy, maintained detailed annals that chronicled daily activities, including candle production. One prevalent method involved the use of ledger books, where each entry was meticulously recorded using a quill and ink made from natural dyes. These ledgers would note the quantities of raw materials received, the amounts of wicks produced, and the sales of finished candles, often accompanied by annotations detailing the quality of both materials and craftsmanship. To further enhance their record-keeping, some monasteries employed a system of marking, where batches of candles would be stamped with specific symbols or insignias, indicating their place of origin or the type of wax used. This practice not only served as a method of quality control but also allowed for easier tracking of inventory levels, especially during peak production seasons such as Advent and Lent. Additionally, the use of charters and formal contracts with local merchants introduced a level of formality to the sales process, ensuring that transactions were recorded accurately and disputes could be resolved with reference to documented agreements. This bureaucratic approach to record-keeping would ultimately lay the groundwork for more sophisticated administrative practices in the centuries to follow, reflecting the growing importance of financial accountability in monastic life. In conclusion, the history of candle wick manufacturing within medieval monasteries is a tapestry woven from regional variances, evolving practices, and meticulous bureaucratic oversight. The logistics of supply chains and the diligent record-keeping efforts of monastic scribes illustrate the complexity inherent in what may seem, at first blush, a mundane craft. Yet it is through these details that we gain a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of medieval life and the seemingly unremarkable aspects that sustained it. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing. Part 7, Regional Variations and Comparisons. The art of candle wick manufacturing, albeit an ostensibly mundane endeavor, demonstrated significant regional variations across the diverse landscapes of medieval Europe. Distinct methodologies were employed, shaped by local resources, cultural practices, and ecclesiastical dictates. In the verdant valleys of England, for instance, the preferred wick material was often derived from flax, a crop that flourished in the moist climate. The monasteries of Canterbury prided themselves on their superior quality wicks, which were meticulously braided to enhance burn time and efficiency. Conversely, the monasteries situated in the sun-drenched regions of southern France gravitated towards the use of cotton wicks. The warmer climate facilitated the growth of cotton plants, which were cultivated with great care by the monastic communities. The monks of the Abbey of St. Riquier, for example, developed a unique wicking technique that involved soaking the cotton fibers in a mixture of beeswax and olive oil, thereby augmenting the wick's longevity and scent. In the northern reaches of Scandinavia, where the harsh winters necessitated longer burning candles, the use of animal fibers became prevalent. The monks of the Trondheim monastery discovered that the coarse hairs from sheep, when twisted and treated with rendered tallow, produced a remarkably resilient wick. This adaptation not only ensured illumination during the long, dark nights but also provided a fascinating study in the resourcefulness of monastic communities facing the rigors of their environments. The differences in wick manufacturing techniques did not merely reflect local preferences, they also served as indicators of the broader socio-economic conditions and agricultural practices prevalent in each region. As such, regional variances in wick production can be viewed as a microcosm of the medieval economy itself, revealing the intricate interplay between geography, culture, and resource availability. Part 8, Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of candle wick manufacturing throughout the medieval period mirrors the broader technological advancements and socio-political changes that characterized the era. In the early Middle Ages, wick production was an entirely artisanal process, with monks relying on rudimentary techniques passed down through generations. The wicks were typically hand-twisted and crafted from whatever fibrous materials were locally available. As the centuries progressed, particularly during the 12th and 13th centuries, a burgeoning sense of trade and commerce began to influence wick manufacturing. The introduction of merchant guilds and increased interregional commerce facilitated the exchange of knowledge and materials. This period saw the emergence of more sophisticated weaving techniques, with the introduction of specialized tools, such as the wick spindle, allowing for greater uniformity in wick size and shape. By the late medieval period, advancements in agricultural practices, such as crop rotation and selective breeding of flax and cotton, led to higher yields and improved quality of raw materials. Monasteries began to establish more organized production processes, often adopting assembly line methodologies that allowed for enhanced efficiency. The monks of the Abbey of Cluny, for example, became noted for their systematic approach to wick production, dividing tasks among multiple artisans to maximize output. The late medieval period also witnessed the incorporation of new materials into wick production, such as the introduction of hemp and the early use of synthetic substances derived from local minerals, which were experimented with in an attempt to create wicks with enhanced properties. This experimentation foreshadowed the eventual Industrial Revolution, where candle manufacturing would undergo a radical transformation. Part 9, Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. Candle wick manufacturing was not immune to the encroaching influence of bureaucracy and regulatory frameworks that characterized the medieval period. As the practice became more formalized, so too did the need for oversight. In many regions, the Church played a pivotal role in establishing regulations governing the production of candles and wicks, primarily to ensure that the materials used were of a suitable quality and met the liturgical standards necessary for religious observance. In the Kingdom of England, for instance, the Statute of Candle Making was enacted in the late 13th century, laying out specific guidelines regarding the dimensions, materials, and burning properties of candles used in ecclesiastical settings. This law mandated that all candles produced for use in churches must contain a specified ratio of beeswax to tallow, thus ensuring a standard of quality and consistency. Violators of this statute faced severe penalties, including fines or, in extreme cases, public reprimand. Furthermore, local guilds often established their own regulations regarding wick production, dictating not only the methods of manufacturing but also the pricing structures and distribution channels. The Guild of Candle Makers in Paris, for example, instituted a rigorous inspection process, requiring that all wicks produced by its members be submitted for quality assessment before being sold in the marketplace. This led to a burgeoning bureaucracy that, while stifling to some degree, ultimately contributed to the standardization of wick manufacturing practices. The increasing complexity of regulations also resulted in a proliferation of documentation. Monks found themselves charged with the responsibility of meticulously recording their production processes, compliance with regulations, and any variances encountered. These records, while tedious in nature, served as essential tools for both accountability and historical reference. Part 10, Supply Chain and Logistics. The supply chain associated with candle wick manufacturing during the medieval period was a multifaceted system, influenced by local agricultural practices, trade routes, and the seasonal availability of raw materials. The production of wicks required a careful orchestration of various inputs, including fibers, wax, and oils, which were often sourced from multiple suppliers. For instance, the flax required for wick production was typically harvested in late summer, necessitating careful planning on the part of monastic communities. The monks would engage in extensive trade networks to secure the necessary quantities of flax, often bartering with neighboring villages in exchange for wool or grain. The logistics of transporting these materials were no small feat. Arduous journeys undertaken by foot or cart sometimes resulted in delays that could impact the timing of production. Once harvested, the flax was processed through a series of labor-intensive steps: retting, drying, and spinning. Monasteries often established relationships with local farmers to streamline the supply of flax, creating an interdependent network that ensured a steady flow of raw materials. Similarly, the procurement of beeswax was often conducted through established trade routes, with beeswax being a sought-after commodity for its superior burning properties compared to tallow. The logistics of wick production also extended to the distribution of finished products. Many monasteries developed intricate delivery systems to transport their candles to local churches and markets. This often entailed the establishment of regular routes, with designated monks responsible for the safe delivery of goods. In some cases, these delivery trips would coincide with pilgrimages, allowing for the simultaneous transport of candles and the influx of visiting worshippers. ###### Part 11 Record-keeping methods. Record-keeping was a crucial aspect of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries. The meticulous documentation of processes, inventories, and sales not only served regulatory purposes but also provided insights into the operational aspects of the monastic economy. The monks employed various methods for recording information, often utilizing parchment or wax tablets for their durability. Monastic scribes, well versed in the art of writing, were tasked with maintaining detailed logs of production activities. These records typically included the quantities of raw materials used, the number of wicks produced, and the time taken for each stage of production. In some instances, these logs would also encompass notes on the quality of materials and any deviations from standard procedures. In addition to production records, monasteries maintained inventory lists to track their stock of wicks and candles. These lists often contain detailed descriptions, including dimensions, materials, and the intended purpose for each item. The monks would perform regular audits to ensure accuracy and accountability, a practice that fostered a culture of diligence and responsibility within the monastic community. Moreover, the introduction of accounting practices during the late medieval period, influenced by the burgeoning merchant class, prompted monasteries to adopt more sophisticated methods of record-keeping. Double-entry bookkeeping began to find its way into monastic accounts, allowing for a more comprehensive understanding of the economic implications of wick production and sales. The meticulous record-keeping practices established during this period would prove invaluable to future generations, not only preserving the legacy of candle wick manufacturing but also contributing to the broader historical narrative of medieval economic practices. ######conclusion. In summation, the history of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries is a tapestry woven from the threads of regional variation, technological evolution, regulatory frameworks, supply chain intricacies, and diligent record-keeping. While the subject matter may initially appear uninspiring, the nuanced examination of these aspects reveals a rich and complex narrative that mirrors the broader socio-economic transformations of the medieval period. As we reflect on the humble wick, we uncover the profound interconnectedness of culture, economy, and technology within the annals of history, illuminating the often overlooked endeavors that shaped our world. The Dull Chronicles of Medieval Monastery Candle Wick Manufacturing, Part 8. Regional Variations and Comparisons. The candle wick manufacturing practices within the confines of medieval monasteries were as diverse as the geographical landscapes from which they emerged. Each region of Europe, influenced by local customs, available resources, and climatic conditions, produced variations in wick-making techniques. In the northern climes of Scandinavia, where resources were scarce and daylight hours were fleeting, the monks often utilized locally sourced materials such as the fibers of the indigenous birch trees. They developed an ingenious method of twisting these fibrous materials into wicks that burned steadily, even in the dampest of conditions. The birch bark, in particular, was prized for its resinous properties, which imparted a pleasant aroma when the wick was ignited. Conversely, the southern regions, such as those in France and Italy, commonly employed flax and hemp fibers for their wicks. The warm, sunny climate allowed for a more extensive cultivation of these plants, resulting in longer, more robust wicks. French monasteries, particularly those within the Cistercian order, were noted for their meticulous attention to the quality of their wicks, which were often bleached in the sun to enhance their burning properties. Records from these establishments indicate that the monks would engage in lengthy discussions about the optimal length and thickness of the wicks to ensure a steady flame that would not flicker or gutter during prayer. In the British Isles, particularly in the monasteries of Wales and Scotland, a different approach was adopted. The monks here often favored the use of rushes, a plant that thrived in the wetland areas of these regions. The rushes were meticulously peeled and dried before being twisted into wicks. This method, while labor-intensive, produced a wick that burned brightly and for an extended duration, which was essential for the long hours of evening prayers during the harsh winter months. Such regional variations not only reflected the practical considerations of materials and climate but also the cultural significance attached to light and illumination in monastic life. The differences in wick manufacturing were often accompanied by unique ceremonial practices, such as the blessing of the wicks in southern France, which involved a special prayer said over the wicks before they were used in the chapel. Evolution over different time periods. The history of candle wick manufacturing within monasteries did not remain static. It evolved significantly over the centuries. During the early medieval period, the craft was relatively rudimentary, with monks primarily focused on survival and basic illumination. The wicks were often short and rudimentary, fashioned from whatever materials were readily available. However, as monastic communities grew in wealth and influence, so too did their technological advancements. By the time of the High Middle Ages, the evolution of wick-making became more pronounced. The introduction of new agricultural practices led to an increase in the cultivation of flax and hemp, which in turn facilitated the production of longer and more durable wicks. The techniques employed by monks also began to reflect a more refined understanding of combustion and the properties of different materials. The 12th century saw the emergence of the twisted wick, a notable advancement that improved burn time and consistency. In the later medieval period, around the 14th and 15th centuries, candle making began to be viewed not only as a necessity but also as an art form. The demand for high-quality candles for both liturgical purposes and domestic use increased significantly. This period witnessed a notable rise in the use of beeswax, which was often combined with traditional wick materials to create candles with superior burning characteristics. The shift towards beeswax candles, often associated with the affluent and higher ecclesiastical ranks, led to the establishment of specialized candle guilds, which regulated the quality and production of both wicks and candles. This era also saw the rise of the artisan candle maker, who often operated independently from monastic confines. However, monasteries maintained their significance as centers of knowledge and innovation in wick making. Monastic records from this period indicate a growing emphasis on experimentation with different materials and techniques, as monks sought to improve their craft in a spirit of devotion and service. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. As the candle wick manufacturing trade developed, so too did the bureaucratic regulations surrounding it. Local lords and ecclesiastical authorities began to impose laws governing the production and sale of candles and candle wicks. These regulations were largely driven by the desire to ensure quality and prevent fraud, as the market became increasingly saturated with inferior products. Monastic communities were often required to adhere to specific standards concerning the composition of their wicks. For instance, a decree issued in the late 13th century by the Bishop of Exeter mandated that all candle wicks produced within his diocese must consist of a minimum percentage of flax fibers to ensure consistent burning. Failure to comply with such regulations could result in severe penalties, including fines or loss of privileges. Additionally, records indicate that monasteries were subjected to inspections by appointed officials who would evaluate the quality of both wicks and candles. These officials were known as candle wardens, and their role included not only the assessment of products but also the verification of compliance with local laws. Monks would often engage in lengthy discussions about the bureaucratic implications of these inspections, with some even attempting to bribe officials to overlook minor infractions. As the candle wick trade became more organized, guilds emerged to represent the interests of candle makers, including those operating within monastic settings. These guilds played a crucial role in establishing industry standards and advocating for the rights of their members. They also maintained records of production methods, which were often closely guarded secrets passed down through generations of candle makers. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of candle wick manufacturing within monasteries were often a complex web of local and regional interactions. The supply chain for wick materials was deeply intertwined with the agricultural cycles of the surrounding lands. Monasteries, often situated in rural areas, relied on their own gardens and fields for the cultivation of flax, hemp, and other essential materials. The timing of planting and harvesting these crops was critical, as the monks had to ensure they had sufficient raw materials to meet the needs of their candle production throughout the year. Transporting these materials to the workshops where the wicks were crafted involved a series of logistical considerations. Monasteries often maintained relationships with local farmers and traders, who would supply them with additional resources when their own crops were insufficient. The use of pack animals, particularly donkeys and oxen, became essential for transporting bulky materials such as bundles of flax and rushes from the fields to the candle-making workshops. Once the wicks were fashioned, the next logistical challenge arose: distribution. Many monasteries served as regional suppliers of candles and wicks, distributing their products not only to local church services but also to nearby households. The monks would often engage in barter exchanges with local tradespeople, trading candles for foodstuffs, textiles, or other necessary goods. This barter system was crucial for sustaining the monastery's economy, particularly in areas where coinage was scarce. In some cases, larger monasteries developed a network of regional outposts or subsidiaries that specialized in candle wick production. These outposts would serve as production hubs, with finished products being transported back to the main monastery for sale or distribution. This logistical strategy allowed for greater efficiency and a wider reach, enabling monasteries to capitalize on the growing demand for quality candle products. Record-keeping methods. The meticulous nature of candle wick manufacturing within monasteries necessitated a robust system of record-keeping. Monks, particularly those trained in the arts of writing and accounting, played a pivotal role in documenting every aspect of the candle-making process. The records maintained by these monks provided invaluable insights into the operational aspects of candle wick production. Monastic records often included detailed inventories of raw materials, production quantities, and sales figures. The monks would utilize wax tablets for preliminary notes, which could be easily erased and reused, while more permanent records would be inscribed on parchment. Certain monasteries developed standardized formats for their records, which included columns for date, type of material used, and the quantity of wicks produced. These records were not only essential for tracking production efficiency but also served to comply with the aforementioned bureaucratic regulations. Additionally, the monks would often document the results of their experiments with different wick materials and techniques. These experimental records provided a wealth of knowledge that would be passed down through generations, allowing for continuous improvement in wick manufacturing practices. The act of record-keeping itself was often viewed as a form of devotion, with monks believing that their meticulous documentation honored God by ensuring that their work was conducted with the utmost diligence and integrity. In conclusion, the history of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries is a testament to the interplay of regional variations, bureaucratic regulations, logistical considerations, and the evolution of practices over time. Each of these elements contributed to the formation of a complex industry that, while seemingly mundane, was deeply embedded in the spiritual and economic fabric of medieval society. The legacy of these humble wicks lives on, casting light on the diligent work of the monastic communities that devoted their lives to the craft. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing, an exhaustive examination of regional variations, temporal evolution, bureaucratic regulations, supply chain logistics, and record-keeping methods. Regional variations and comparisons. As one delves deeper into the annals of candle wick manufacturing within medieval monasteries, one cannot help but notice the nuanced regional variations that punctuated this seemingly mundane industry. Candle wick production, while universally recognized as a pivotal component of the monastic economy, was influenced by local resources, climatic conditions, and cultural practices. In the misty moors of northern England, for instance, the predominant choice of wick material was derived from the fibrous flax plant, which thrived in the damp, temperate climate. Monasteries in this region, such as the illustrious Whitby Abbey, became renowned for their superior quality flax wicks, often lauded for their ability to burn evenly and produce minimal smoke. The monks of Whitby, following the local agrarian calendar, would harvest flax during the late summer months. Following this, the flax fibers would undergo a meticulous process of retting, which involved soaking in water to separate the fibers from the stem. Thus, a unique local methodology emerged, emphasizing a slow and deliberate extraction process, reflective of the monastic values of patience and diligence. In contrast, the monasteries of southern France, particularly those situated near the Mediterranean coast, favored the cultivation of cotton for wick production. The sun-drenched fields of Provence provided an abundance of cotton plants, which were harvested in a manner similar to that of their northern counterparts, though the climatic conditions allowed for a more rapid drying process. The monks of St. Trophime, for instance, developed a technique that involved spinning the cotton fibers into wicks that were remarkably thin and lightweight, enhancing the candle's ability to yield a bright flame. The regional variation in wick thickness not only reflected the availability of raw materials but also had implications for the types of candles produced. The thinner wicks of southern France were often employed in religious ceremonies requiring a more luminous light, whereas the thicker wicks from northern England served practical purposes, illuminating the more austere monastic living quarters. In the central regions of the Holy Roman Empire, such as the Abbey of Fulda, the monks faced a different set of challenges, including political instability and resource scarcity. Here, the use of tallow, rendered from animal fat, became a favored alternative to plant-based wicks. This decision was influenced by the proximity to livestock, allowing the monks to utilize existing resources rather than relying solely on the cultivation of specific plants. The tallow wicks produced in Fulda were notably more robust, providing a long burn time, albeit with a characteristic odor that could be considered off-putting in comparison to the more fragrant plant-based alternatives. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of candle wick manufacturing cannot be overstated as it mirrors broader socio-economic shifts throughout medieval Europe. Initially, during the early medieval period, candle wicks were rudimentary at best, often simply twisted strands of flax or hemp fibers. These primitive designs were functional yet lacked the refinement that would come with time and technological advancement. By the 11th century, as monastic life became increasingly organized, so too did the processes surrounding candle production. The introduction of guilds and the regulation of trade practices precipitated a greater emphasis on quality control. Monasteries began to standardize wick sizes, which led to the emergence of a more uniform product. This period also saw the development of specialized tools for wick making, such as the wick maker's frame, a relatively simple device that allowed monks to twist and braid fibers more efficiently. The 12th and 13th centuries marked a significant turning point in wick manufacturing, coinciding with the rise of urban centers and the burgeoning market economy. Monasteries began to sell their candle products beyond the cloister walls, leading to an increased demand for higher quality wicks. This demand prompted further innovations, for instance, the introduction of the wick dipping method, wherein multiple layers of wax were applied to the wick to enhance its burn characteristics. By the late Middle Ages, the candle wick industry had evolved into a complex system, with monasteries competing not only with one another but also with increasingly sophisticated secular candle makers. This competition necessitated a focus on efficiency and quality, leading to the refinement of production techniques and the optimization of the supply chain. The introduction of new materials, such as beeswax wicks, became a symbol of status among the affluent, further driving the evolution of wick manufacturing practices throughout the period. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. As candle wick manufacturing became increasingly professionalized, so too did the bureaucratic oversight governing this industry. Local and regional authorities recognized the economic potential inherent in candle production, leading to the establishment of regulations aimed at standardizing practices and ensuring quality control. In England, for example, the Candle Makers Act of 1344 mandated that all candles produced within the realm adhere to specific weight and size standards. This regulation was crucial in preventing the practice of short selling, where merchants would deceptively sell candles that were smaller than advertised. Monasteries, often serving as the primary suppliers of candles to local churches and households, were compelled to comply with these regulations. Failure to do so could result in fines or the confiscation of goods, thus incentivizing adherence to standards. In addition to weight and size, regulations also extended to the materials used in wick production. The use of tallow was heavily monitored, particularly as concerns about the quality of animal fat grew. In 1364, a law was enacted requiring candle makers to submit samples of their tallow for inspection by local magistrates. Monasteries that produced candles for public consumption were particularly affected, as these regulations ensured that the products they offered met the growing expectations of the populace. Moreover, the Church itself instituted its own set of guidelines for candle production. The Rule of Saint Benedict, a foundational text for many monastic communities, included provisions regarding the use of candles during liturgical services. This attention to detail underscored the sacred nature of candle use within ecclesiastical settings, prompting monasteries to ensure that their wicks were not only functional but also aesthetically pleasing. Supply chain and logistics. The supply chain associated with candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries was a multifaceted operation, encompassing various stages from raw material procurement to distribution. The logistical challenges faced by these monastic communities were significant, particularly given the limitations of transportation technology during the era. At the outset, the sourcing of raw materials was often dictated by the monastery's geographical location. Monasteries situated in agricultural regions could rely on local farmers for flax, cotton, or hemp, while those situated near livestock were more dependent on animal byproducts for tallow. Seasonal variations played a crucial role in this supply chain. For instance, the harvest of flax or cotton would necessitate careful planning to ensure that the subsequent production of wicks aligned with the liturgical calendar, particularly during high-demand periods such as Advent and Lent. Once raw materials were procured, the logistics of processing them into usable wicks presented another layer of complexity. Monks often engaged in cooperative labor, pooling their resources and expertise to streamline production. The establishment of communal workshops within the monastery allowed for efficient use of space and personnel, facilitating the transition from raw fiber to finished product. Distribution was yet another critical aspect of the supply chain. Monasteries often served as central hubs for candle distribution within their respective regions, supplying local churches and households. The monks would meticulously track orders and deliveries, often utilizing packhorses to transport goods to neighboring villages. The establishment of trade routes became essential, particularly as demand surged for higher quality candles in urban centers. Monasteries would occasionally engage in barter systems with local merchants, exchanging candles for other goods or services, thus further embedding themselves within the local economy. Record-keeping methods. The importance of record-keeping in the realm of candle wick manufacturing cannot be overstated. Monasteries were renowned for their meticulous documentation practices, which served both spiritual and practical purposes. Detailed records of candle production, sales, and inventory were maintained, providing insight into the economic viability of this industry. Monastic scribes employed various methods to document their activities, often utilizing parchment or vellum for record-keeping. The system of accounting employed varied from monastery to monastery, with some utilizing simple tally marks to track production output, while others adopted more sophisticated ledgers. These ledgers often included entries detailing the types of wicks produced, quantities, and even the materials used in their manufacture. Such comprehensive documentation enabled monks to assess profitability and make informed decisions regarding resource allocation. Additionally, records of sales transactions were meticulously kept, detailing the names of customers and the quantities of candles purchased. This practice not only assisted in maintaining financial accountability but also fostered a sense of community among the monks and their patrons. By tracking customer preferences, monasteries could tailor their production efforts, ensuring that they met the specific demands of their clientele. In conclusion, the history of candle wick manufacturing within medieval monasteries is a rich tapestry woven with regional variations, evolving practices, bureaucratic regulations, complex supply chains, and meticulous record-keeping methods. While the subject may seem tedious, it offers a fascinating glimpse into the daily lives of monks and the integral role that candle production played within their communities. As one contemplates the flickering flame of a candle, it is essential to recognize the myriad of factors that converge to bring that candle into existence, illuminating both the physical space and the spiritual journey of those who created it. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing, an in-depth exploration of regional variations, evolution, bureaucratic regulations, supply chain logistics, and record-keeping methods. Part 10: Regional Variations and Comparisons. As candle wick manufacturing proliferated across medieval Europe, distinct regional variations emerged, influenced by local resources, traditions, and ecclesiastical directives. In the northern reaches of England, particularly in the counties of Yorkshire and Northumberland, candle wicks were predominantly crafted from the fibers of flax, a crop that thrived in the cooler climates. The local monasteries, such as Fountains Abbey, took pride in their method of soaking flax fibers in water to soften them before twisting them into rudimentary wicks. This practice was not merely a matter of utility but also a reflection of the region's agricultural practices and the monks' resourceful adaptations to their environment. Conversely, in the southern parts of England, particularly in Kent and Sussex, the abundance of hemp led to a marked preference for hemp-derived wicks. The durability and burning efficiency of hemp made it an attractive alternative, especially for the monasteries that supported larger candle production for liturgical purposes. The monks at Canterbury Cathedral, for instance, became known for their expertise in crafting long-lasting wicks that burned steadily through the night, allowing for extended periods of prayer and contemplation. When comparing the candle wick manufacturing practices in continental Europe, similar patterns emerge. The monasteries of France, particularly those in the Champagne region, favored the use of cotton, a fiber that was becoming increasingly available due to trade routes established during the Crusades. The monks of the Abbey of Clairvaux utilized cotton wicking techniques that involved intricate plaiting, leading to wicks that were not only functional but also aesthetically pleasing. This innovation highlights a burgeoning awareness of the wick's role in enhancing the overall candle experience, as light quality became an important consideration for ecclesiastical settings. Further south, in the Mediterranean regions, particularly in Italy, the practice of candle wick manufacturing began to incorporate olive oil, a resource that was plentiful in the region. Monasteries such as the Benedictine Abbey of Monte Cassino adopted this method, leading to the creation of oil lamps that sometimes utilized handcrafted wicks made from animal hair. These variations are significant not only for their functional differences but also for how they reflect the cultural and economic contexts of their respective regions. Part 11: Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of candle wick manufacturing from the early medieval period through to the late Middle Ages demonstrates a gradual yet significant transformation in techniques and materials. Initially, during the early medieval period, circa 500–1000 AD, the wicks were rudimentary, often composed of twisted plant fibers or animal hair. The technological advancements of the 11th century heralded the introduction of more sophisticated techniques as trade networks expanded, enabling access to a wider variety of materials. By the 12th century, a growing understanding of combustion and materials science began to influence wick production. Monasteries became centers of learning, where monks documented their candle-making processes in detailed manuscripts. These treatises included recipes for optimal wick composition, guiding novices in the art of crafting wicks that would produce a more even flame. The increasing popularity of candles for both religious and domestic use necessitated a refinement of production methods. The 14th century marked a significant shift as the demand for candles surged, propelled by the advent of Gothic architecture and the expansion of cathedrals. The need for larger and longer burning candles prompted the exploration of new wick materials and configurations. Wicks became thicker and were often braided in various patterns to increase their burning time and stability. Candle-making guilds began to form, establishing standards and practices that would govern the quality of candle wicks produced throughout the region. By the 15th century, the production of candle wicks had become somewhat standardized across monasteries, with some adopting more industrialized methods. Wicks were now often produced in bulk, utilizing specialized tools that allowed for greater efficiency in crafting. The rise of urban centers also contributed to this evolution, as monasteries began to cater to a burgeoning market for candles, leading to the establishment of trade routes specifically for the distribution of candle-making materials. Part 12. Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The candle wick industry did not flourish in a vacuum, rather, it was subjected to a myriad of bureaucratic regulations and laws that govern production standards, trade practices, and pricing structures. The Church, recognizing the importance of candlelight in religious ceremonies, often imposed strict guidelines on the manufacturing of candles and their components, including wicks. In the early 13th century, the Fourth Lateran Council decreed that all churches must have sufficient candles for liturgical celebrations, inadvertently establishing a market for candle wick manufacturers. This decree led to the establishment of local ordinances dictating how many candles could be produced by each monastery, often based on the size and wealth of the abbey. Monasteries were required to keep meticulous records of their production, ensuring compliance with these regulations. Moreover, there were laws regarding the quality of materials used in wick manufacturing. The Statute of Wicks, enacted in the late 14th century, mandated that only certain approved materials could be used in wick production. This statute aimed to prevent fraud and ensure that candles burned evenly and produced minimal smoke, thereby preserving the sanctity of the worship space. Monasteries found in violation of these laws faced penalties, including fines and restrictions on future candle production. The rising influence of trade guilds in the 15th century introduced additional layers of regulation, as guilds sought to protect their interests. The Guild of Candle Makers in London, for example, lobbied for laws that favored the production of locally made candles and wicks, limiting imported goods. This led to a complex web of regulations that not only governed the quality and production of candle wicks but also dictated how they were marketed and sold. Part 13. Supply Chain and Logistics. The logistics of candle wick manufacturing during the medieval period were far from simple. They involved a complex network of supply chains that integrated various resources, skilled labor, and distribution channels. The primary materials for wick production, flax, hemp, cotton, and occasionally animal hair, were sourced from local agricultural communities. Monasteries often maintained close relationships with local farmers to ensure a steady supply of these materials, which were critical to their candle-making operations. Once the raw materials were procured, the logistics of transporting them to the monasteries were crucial. In regions where waterways were accessible, such as along the Rhine or Seine rivers, monks often utilized barges to transport bulk materials. In contrast, in more mountainous areas, such as the Alps, materials were transported by pack animals, a labor-intensive endeavor that required careful planning to navigate difficult terrain. The production process itself was carefully timed to align with the agricultural cycles. For instance, flax harvesting occurred in late summer, and monasteries needed to prepare their production schedules accordingly. The monks developed efficient workflows to ensure that the transition from raw material to finished wick was seamless. It was not uncommon for some monasteries to establish specialized roles within their candle-making operations, with individuals dedicated to spinning, weaving, and assembling wicks. Once manufactured, the distribution of candle wicks posed another set of logistical challenges. Monasteries often served as central hubs for candle production, distributing their products to local churches and communities. The establishment of trade fairs in towns and cities provided additional opportunities for monasteries to market their candles and wicks, leading to the establishment of more formalized trade routes. Part 14: Record-Keeping Methods. The record-keeping methods employed by monasteries in relation to candle wick manufacturing were indicative of the broader administrative practices of the time. Monks, often educated and literate, took it upon themselves to meticulously document every aspect of the candle-making process. These records served multiple purposes. They provided accountability, facilitated the tracking of inventory, and ensured compliance with ecclesiastical regulations. Monasteries utilized a variety of record-keeping methods, primarily through the use of ledgers and scrolls. The most common form of record was the wicker, a dedicated ledger that detailed the materials used in wick production, the number of wicks produced, and the dates of production. These records were often annotated with the names of the monks responsible for specific batches, creating a sense of ownership and pride in their work. In addition to production records, monasteries maintained financial accounts related to candle sales, which required even more rigorous documentation. This included receipts for materials purchased, payments made to laborers, and revenue generated from candle sales. The monks developed a system of double-entry bookkeeping, an innovative practice for the time, which allowed them to balance their accounts accurately. This method not only contributed to fiscal responsibility but also provided a clear historical record of their economic activities. Furthermore, the monks often included annotations related to the quality and performance of the wicks produced, noting any issues encountered during production. Such observations contributed to an informal body of knowledge that would be shared among the monastic community, fostering a culture of continuous improvement in their craft. By the late medieval period, the practice of record-keeping had become increasingly sophisticated, with some monasteries employing scribes whose sole responsibility was the documentation of candle and wick production. These records, now archived, provide historians with invaluable insights into the economic, social, and technological aspects of candle wick manufacturing during this otherwise uneventful period in history. In conclusion, the history of candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries embodies a tapestry of regional variations, evolving techniques, regulatory frameworks, logistical challenges, and diligent record-keeping practices. Each layer of this narrative reveals the intricate interplay between faith, agriculture, and emerging commerce, forming a comprehensive understanding of a seemingly mundane yet fundamentally essential industry that illuminated the lives of many in the dark recesses of medieval life. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing. In the realm of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing, the minutiae of the process are often overlooked, overshadowed by grand narratives of battles, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires. Yet, upon a closer examination, the candle wick, a seemingly trivial component of candle making, reveals a fascinating tapestry woven with the threads of minor historical figures, specific case studies, comparative analysis, archaeological findings, and primary source quotations that may not inspire excitement but Hashtag the unsung heroes, minor historical figures. While prominent abbots and monks often receive the limelight in historical texts, there exists a cadre of lesser-known figures who played pivotal roles in the candle wick manufacturing process. One such figure is Brother Oswald of St. Augustine's Abbey, who, in the year 1253, documented his meticulous observations regarding the preparation of wick fibers. His treatise, De Lumine Sera, translates to On Light and Wax, and within its pages, Brother Oswald devoted entire sections to the selection of flax fibers, emphasizing the importance of their length and fineness. Oswald noted, "The finest wicks are born of the longest fibers, twisted gently to form a core, lest they burn unevenly and leave the monastic chapel shrouded in shadows." His insights, although lacking in excitement, provided the foundation for subsequent wick-making techniques. Another notable figure was Sister Agnes of the Benedictine order, who, in the year 1287, initiated a series of workshops aimed at educating novice monks about the art of wick crafting. In her lectures, she emphasized the significance of moisture content in the fibers, proclaiming, "Let not the damp hinder the flame, for a wick too wet shall smother the light." Such wisdom, although seemingly mundane, was crucial in ensuring that the candles lit for evening prayers burned steadily, providing solace in the darkness of night. Hashtag specific case studies with dates. Delving into specific case studies, we can examine the candle wick manufacturing practices at the Abbey of St. Mary of the Valley, noted for its extensive candle production during the late 13th century. In 1295, records indicate that the abbey produced approximately 2,000 candles, each requiring a meticulously crafted wick. The abbey's ledgers reveal detailed accounts of raw materials used, including the quantities of flax and tallow procured from local markets. One particularly illuminating entry from the abbey's record states, "In the month of April, the 9th day, we received 30 pounds of the finest flax from the merchant Thomas, in exchange for 5 loaves of bread and a measure of ale." This transaction, while seemingly trivial, highlights the economic interdependence between monasteries and local trade, showcasing how candle wick production was not merely a monastic endeavor but a community affair. Furthermore, the year 1302 saw the introduction of a new method for treating flax fibers, which involved soaking them in a solution of water and lye to enhance their combustibility. A monastic scribe noted, "The wicks thus prepared burn with a light most pleasing, illuminating the sacred texts with a brilliance that echoes the divine." This innovation marked a significant turning point in the quality of candles produced, leading to an increase in demand from neighboring parishes. Hashtag comparative analysis with other regions. When comparing the candle wick manufacturing practices of the English monasteries to those in the continent, particularly in regions such as Flanders and Bavaria, one notes distinct differences in both technique and materials. For instance, while English monks predominantly used flax for wick production, Flemish monasteries often employed hemp due to its greater availability and resilience. In a comparative study conducted by Brother Matthias of the Cistercian order in the year 1320, he remarked, "The wicks of Flanders, robust and stout, outlast those of our English brethren, yet they lack the grace of the finer fibers we cultivate." Such observations underscore the regional variances that influenced candle wick production, with factors such as climate, local agriculture, and market accessibility dictating the choice of materials. Moreover, Bavarian monasteries had developed a unique technique of braiding wicks, which was said to enhance the candle's burn time significantly. A Bavarian monk, in a correspondence dated 1335, asserted, "Our braided wicks, intertwined as the fabric of our faith, yield a flame that dances with the vigor of the Holy Spirit." This comparative analysis illustrates how geography and culture shaped the practices and quality of candle wick manufacturing across different regions. #Archaeological findings and interpretations. The archaeological record provides a wealth of information regarding candle wick manufacturing in medieval monasteries. Excavations at the site of the Abbey of St. John in the year 1998 unearthed remnants of flax fibers, tallow, and even incomplete wicks, contributing to our understanding of the materials used. The stratigraphic analysis of these findings indicated a striking consistency in production techniques over several centuries. One particularly noteworthy find was the discovery of a series of clay molds used for shaping candles, which dated back to approximately 1250. These molds suggested that monasteries not only crafted wicks but also produced candles of varying sizes and shapes for different liturgical purposes. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Helena Worthington, commented, "The presence of these molds highlights the sophistication of monastic candle production, revealing a depth of understanding in both utility and artistry." In addition, the analysis of residue found within the molds indicated a preference for animal fat over vegetable oils, aligning with historical texts that reference the use of tallow in monasteries. This discovery led to a re-evaluation of previous assumptions regarding the materials utilized in candle making, prompting further research into the economic implications of tallow procurement and its impact on monastic life. #Primary source quotations, invented but plausible. The dull chronicles of candle wick manufacturing are further enriched by the inclusion of primary source quotations that, while invented, resonate with the tone and style of the period. For instance, an entry from a monastic diary in the year 1344 states, "Let us gather the finest of fibers, for the light we cast must reflect the purity of our souls." A wick poorly made is a reflection of a life poorly lived. This sentiment encapsulates the monastic ethos surrounding candle making, a belief that every aspect of their craft was not merely a task but an act of devotion. Another quote, attributed to Brother Cedric, an obscure but diligent monk, reads, "As the wick is to the candle, so is the soul to the divine. Without proper care, both shall falter in their duty to illuminate the path." This philosophical musing not only reveals the depth of contemplation surrounding the craft but also serves to illustrate how intertwined the act of wick making was with the spiritual lives of the monks. Additionally, a lamentation from Sister Agnes in the year 1290 captures the trials of candle production. "Oh, the fickle nature of tallow! It hath betrayed us once again, rendering our efforts in vain as the flames devour our labor." Such expressions provide insight into the challenges faced by those involved in the craft and underscore the emotional weight carried by the act of candle making within the monastic community. #Conclusion. In conclusion, the dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing offer an unexpectedly rich narrative, woven through the lives of minor historical figures, specific case studies, comparative analyses, archaeological findings, and poignant quotations. Each aspect, while seemingly mundane, contributes to a broader understanding of the monastic world, reflecting a period where even the most trivial elements of daily life were imbued with significance. As we delve into the minutiae of candle wick production, we uncover a world where the flickering flame of a candle was not merely a source of light but a beacon of faith, illuminating the path of devotion and dedication within the hallowed halls of medieval monasteries. The legacy of these unsung craftsmen and their craft may not inspire excitement, but it undeniably provides a detailed and exhaustive chronicle of an essential aspect of monastic life, ensuring that the story of candle wick manufacturing will not be extinguished in the annals of history. The dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing is a vast and intricate tapestry of the mundane yet pivotal role that candle wick production played in monastic life. This exploration shall delve into the minor historical figures associated with this industry, their roles, and the broader context of candle wick manufacturing during the medieval period. To achieve this end, we will examine specific case studies, comparative analyses with other regions, and archaeological findings that paint a comprehensive picture of this seemingly trivial yet essential craft. #minor historical figures and their roles. In the realm of candle wick manufacturing within medieval monasteries, several lesser-known figures emerged, leaving a subtle but significant mark on the industry. One such figure is Brother Albinus of St. Augustine's Monastery, who lived in the late 12th century. Albinus was not merely a monk, he was an innovator in the field of wick-making. His treatise, De Lumen et Wick, written in 1187, provides extensive details about the types of fibers used in wick-making, including flax, hemp, and the occasional use of cotton, which had begun to make its way into Europe from the Middle East. Another noteworthy individual is Sister Gertrude of the Abbey of St. Clare, who served as the abbess in the early 13th century. Sister Gertrude was instrumental in establishing a rigorous training program for novice monks and nuns in the art of wick-making. She believed that the production of high-quality wicks was not only a matter of practicality but also a spiritual discipline. In her diary, she wrote, "As the wick draws forth the flame, so too does the soul draw forth the Spirit of God." Her emphasis on the spiritual significance of wick-making helped elevate its status within the monastic community. Specific case studies with dates. The year 1254 marks a pivotal moment in the history of wick manufacturing at the Monastery of Saint Bernard in France. The monastery had a significant annual festival celebrating the Feast of the Presentation, where candles played a central role. In preparation for this event, the monks undertook a comprehensive audit of their candle wick production. They discovered that the quality of wicks had diminished over the years due to a lack of proper materials and techniques. In response, Brother Eustace, a master wick-maker, was summoned to revamp the production process. He introduced a new method known as the double-dipping technique, where wicks were repeatedly dipped in melted tallow to enhance their burning quality. This method not only improved the longevity of the candles but also yielded a brighter flame, which was crucial for the evening prayers and vigils that defined monastic life. By 1260, the success of Brother Eustace's innovations had become widely recognized, and other monasteries began to adopt similar practices. This led to the establishment of a network of candle wick manufacturers within monasteries across northern France, which ultimately contributed to an informal economy centered around candle production. ### Comparative analysis with other regions. When examining candle wick manufacturing in medieval Europe, it is essential to consider the comparative practices in other regions. For instance, while monasteries in northern France focused primarily on animal fat, tallow, for candle production, the monks of southern Italy, especially those in the Abbey of Monte Cassino, favored beeswax. The use of beeswax was not merely a matter of preference but was deeply rooted in local agricultural practices. In 1275, a comparative study conducted by Brother Lorenzo of the Abbey of San Giovanni in Laterano recorded that beeswax candles produced a cleaner and more fragrant burn than their tallow counterparts. However, the cost of beeswax made it less accessible to many monasteries, leading to a bifurcation in candle quality that reflected the economic disparities of the regions. Brother Lorenzo noted in his writings, "The light of beeswax illuminates the soul, while the tallow, though humble, warms the hearth." Furthermore, the monasteries in England faced challenges with wick production due to the damp climate, which affected the quality of the fibers used. A case study from the Abbey of Glastonbury in 1302 revealed that the monks experimented with local reeds and grasses as wick materials, resulting in a unique candle that burned with a flickering light reminiscent of the shadows of their cloisters. Archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological digs at various medieval monastery sites have unearthed a wealth of artifacts associated with candle wick manufacturing. In 1968, excavations at the site of the Abbey of Cluny revealed remnants of ancient wick molds, which provided critical insights into the production techniques of the time. These molds, often made of clay or metal, were designed to shape the wicks and were found in various sizes, indicating the production of candles for different purposes, from small votives to large altar candles. Additionally, residues of tallow and beeswax found in storage containers suggest that monasteries often engaged in the seasonal bulk production of candles, particularly in preparation for significant liturgical events. The analysis of these residues revealed that monastic communities were adept at managing their resources, balancing the use of tallow during lean seasons while relying on beeswax when available. One particularly fascinating finding from the Abbey of St. Peter in 1985 was a series of inscribed wooden tablets detailing the inventory of candle wicks and their respective uses. These tablets, dated to 1342, included detailed records of the types of wicks produced, the materials used, and even the specific monks responsible for their production. This level of record-keeping illustrates the importance of candle wick manufacturing in the daily life of the monastery and its economic implications. Primary source quotations, invented but plausible. Throughout the chronicles of candle wick manufacturing, one can find reflections on the craft that resonate with the spiritual and communal aspects of monastic life. Brother Albinus, in his aforementioned treatise, penned The wick is the bridge between the earthly and the divine, drawing the light from the heavens to illuminate our path. In a letter dated 1310 to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sister Gertrude expressed, "In the flicker of our candles, we find solace and unity. Let the wicks we craft burn bright as a symbol of our devotion." The meticulous nature of candle wick production is further encapsulated in the words of Brother Eustace, who mused, "Each wick, though humble in its form, bears the weight of our prayers and the light of our faith." Conclusion. In conclusion, the dull chronicles of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing present a surprisingly rich narrative woven through minor historical figures, specific case studies, comparative analyses, archaeological findings, and imagined primary source quotations. The craft of candle wick making, often dismissed as mundane, reveals a profound connection to the spiritual and communal life of medieval monasteries. Through the lens of this craft, we gain insight into the daily lives of monks and nuns, their innovations, and their enduring legacy in the realm of light and devotion. As one reflects on this extensive and detailed account, it becomes evident that the art of candle wick manufacturing was not merely a matter of practicality but a vital thread in the fabric of monastic existence, deserving of recognition, albeit with an inherent propensity to induce a profound sense of tranquility and slumber. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our tranquil journey through the serene and often overlooked world of medieval monastery candle wick manufacturing. We have taken a gentle stroll through the flickering candlelit halls of history, exploring the meticulous craftsmanship that transformed humble materials into sources of warmth and light. From the delicate fibers of flax and cotton to the soothing rhythm of the monks' hands as they prepared each wick, we have witnessed the dedication and simplicity that characterized this ancient art. As we reminisced about the quietude of the cloistered life, we marveled at how the simple act of crafting candle wicks was intertwined with the daily rhythms of monastic existence. Each wick, carefully created, served a greater purpose, illuminating sacred texts, guiding evening prayers, and fostering a sense of peace within the monastery's stone walls. It is a gentle reminder of how even the most mundane tasks can hold profound significance, echoing the serenity of a life devoted to contemplation and faith. As you prepare to drift into the peaceful embrace of sleep, may the calmness of our journey accompany you into your dreams. Picture the soft glow of candlelight, flickering gently in the stillness of the night, casting shadows that dance like whispers of history. Allow the soothing imagery of monks at work, their quiet diligence echoing through the ages, to wrap around you like a warm blanket, inviting you to release the worries of your day. Thank you for joining me on this soothing expedition into the past. Your presence has made this journey all the more special, and I hope you found comfort in the stories we shared. If ever you wish to revisit the calm of our exploration, feel free to replay this video, allowing the gentle cadence of the narrative to lull you into relaxation once more. As you close your eyes, may you find tranquility in the knowledge that, like the candle wicks of old, your own light shines bright, even in the darkest of times. Let go of the day's burdens and embrace the stillness of the night. Remember that each moment of rest is a gift, a chance to recharge and renew. So, dear listeners, I wish you a peaceful and restorative sleep. May your dreams be filled with soft glimmers of light, and may you awaken refreshed, ready to embrace the dawn. Good night, and sweet dreams await you on the other side of slumber.